Today on No Former Athlete podcast, we're joined by Jill Hutchison, an absolute trailblazer in women's basketball. Jill shares her experience transitioning from athlete to coach and now to retirement. We'll hear about the challenges she faced advocating for women's sports in the 1960s and beyond.
Sports for women were not considered ladylike.
The impact of Title IX and how her graduate work literally proved that women could physically play full court basketball. I know you're going to enjoy hearing from this legendary Women's Basketball Hall of Famer. Let's jump into it. Jill, thank you for coming on my podcast.
Absolutely.
Welcome, No Former Athlete.
I'm happy to do this.
Love
I
it.
think it's cool.
I love it. One way I like to start with everybody, are you an athlete?
That would be in the broadest sense of the term, to say the least. When I was younger, I was an athlete. I still play at golf.
Okay.
That's not play golf, that's play at golf. So, yeah, I still love to play,
Yeah.
but that's about the last thing I can do now.
What makes you say that you were and that you no longer are allowed to consider yourself an athlete? How does your brain define that?
Old age.
Okay.
Trust me. You reach a point where your body just can't do stuff anymore. I tried to hit a softball and shoot a basket, and it was a quick lesson that I was definitely over the hill.
You felt it a couple days after?
No,
You
you're just
took a
not
swing?
capable of doing what
Fair.
you could do.
Yeah.
So it's just not worth it.
I mean, fair enough. Fair enough. Jill Hutchison, as an athlete, what did she do? How'd she get into sports?
Long story because I'm very old, but
I'm here for it.
when I was a kid, I was an Army brat.
Okay.
We traveled all over the world, and I got really interested in sports. My dad was stationed in Albuquerque for a year when I was in 7th grade. We had a male PE teacher who, why I'll never know, he decided to have a girls' basketball team. So it was back in the 3-on-3 stage.
Yeah.
And we had some decent athletes in our little bitty class. So he coached us up, and we played against parochial schools because the public schools obviously had no teams.
Gotcha.
I loved it. And
She was
wasn't,
hooked.
I wasn't skilled. So I played defense, and I could rebound and pass and do all of that. So I got into it. And then we went to Germany 3 years.
Yeah.
And there was nothing. That was kind of the thing back in the late 50s, early 60s. It was calisthenics and make the country more healthy and stuff. So we marched, we did calisthenics. We came back 3 years later, the very end of my sophomore year, to Albuquerque again, and we were in a public school. I was in high school. So it was the last month of my sophomore year. My high school PE teacher there had a program that I don't think you'd find any place in the country. She was an ISNU grad in Albuquerque, and ISNU, when she was here in the 40s, had a big sports day program. Esther French was the chair of the department, dynamic leader, into athletics, provided opportunities for
Yeah.
kids back then.
Early leader.
God. Think about it in the
Yeah.
40s.
Like even
I
just
mean,
getting
she
into
was-
that position.
Well, there was a men's and women's physical education department, so she was the women's head
Okay.
of PE. Obviously, no athletic department. So Tiny, my teacher in Albuquerque, had every sport you could imagine. I mean, and so when I got there, golly, I think we came in late April, early May, and we were into softball. Well, I can throw, I could play. So I played softball. The next year, we played basketball, volleyball, softball, field hockey, speedway, which was really fun. Every sport. And, you play them for maybe a couple months, and then you go on to the next sport, which was to die
I was going to
for.
say, that's incredible. Even some of,
It was.
even that range of sport.
Oh, yeah.
Even when I think back to, my PE classes, it was, just kind of the traditional ones, and all that. It's that's incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Someone could really find their knack.
It was awesome. And we had a huge program. I mean, we had hundreds of girls that were playing in what they called GAA, Girls Athletic Association. So we competed against other schools in town. She set up competition with state schools. We ended up with a state track meet. I mean, it was just, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. So I graduated, and Tiny really wanted me to come to Illinois State. And I decided to stay in Albuquerque. So I went to University of New Mexico. They had a good sports day program, and that's all anybody had back then. Coaches were teachers that had really no coaching experience, but were going to give us the opportunities. So I played volleyball, softball, basketball, even tried swimming and tennis, which were real disasters.
It's like, please keep me on a court.
Yeah,
But other than
exactly.
that, I feel
But
you.
it was fun. I loved it.
And that, so like, were you practicing those regularly, or it was just like on that day or
No,
during
no,
the
no.
competition?
High school and college, both, there's practice. Not a lot. Maybe an hour and a half a day, 3 days a week, something like that. So yeah, we would practice. Then we'd go to a sports day. And for those people who have no idea what a sports day was, we might have 10 other schools that would all come to one location. This was in high school. Tiny would have coffee and donuts for all the teacher coaches, and we would set up the competition. We would coach each other. We would officiate. We did everything. So literally, you learned how to do it all.
All the things.
Yeah, which was, I mean, I loved it. I thought it was to
That's
die
awesome.
for.
Yeah.
And when I got to college, we still had practices and sports days, and it was Intermountain, so we would go to BYU or Arizona or something like that. And then I graduated, and on the side, I played AAU basketball, which was totally frowned upon in that day. I mean, I had two classmates that got kicked out of school for it, literally.
Because they were playing on teams and they were
They
just like,
played on
no.
my team, and I was the third one, and a teacher at the university spoke up for me and saved me. Those two came back, sat out a year, and had to come back.
Who was kicking them out?
The
school
the staff in the physical education department.
staff?
Oh, back then, sports for women were not considered ladylike. And so physical educators were trying to establish their programs on campuses. And so they wanted to stay with the norm, and therefore playing competitive sports in AAU or ASA softball, which we did too.
They didn't want their program to get shut down by going too far into sports.
Not
Is that
so
it?
sure if it was so much shut down. It was the image it had, and the jock image. And that was really the motivation for a lot of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can remember sitting in a major class my junior year, and it was on organizational stuff in sports. And we were talking about how to set up a round robin or an elimination tournament and doing the brackets and stuff like that. And Prof at the time was president of a national organization called DGWS, the Division for Girls and Women's Sports, which wrote all the rules for all the sports for 30 years easily. Anyway, she was president of that organization. So I asked her, I said, hey, Dr. McGill, why can't we compete if the guys can compete like that? Why can't we have a round robin or a bracket tournament?
So when you were learning this, you were learning how to write these things, but it was only for men's tournaments.
Oh, yeah.
So you were capable of creating the tournament format.
Yeah.
But you weren't allowed to make these for yourself.
She ripped me from one end to the other in front of the class. I walked out of there. I was so mad, and I decided I'm going to be a coach, and we're going to have programs. I mean, that just totally motivated me.
That was your spark.
That was the trigger.
The work.
I taught junior high there for a year, and this other gal who graduated at the same time, she did all the individual sports because I didn't know squat about them. And so I did all the team sport. We got to a basketball game, and the other coach called a timeout. And I thought, okay, I didn't call this one. I really don't know what to do. I thought, I got to learn how to coach. So I decided when I finished that year, I would go to grad school and see if I could find something.
Yeah.
And here I am
And
at
here
Illinois
you are.
State 50-some
Here you
years
are.
later. Yeah.
You've lived here ever since,
Yeah, I
haven't
have.
you?
Yeah. But it was one of maybe 3 programs in the country that had any kind of close to an intercollegiate program at the time. We had 4 teams in basketball, 4 in softball, 2 in
Yeah.
field hockey. I mean, we just had the humongous program.
That's wild.
And those who graduated from here, even before I got here, are the ladies that started all the interscholastic programs in the state.
Incredible.
Yeah, it was a
And that's where
phenomenal
you're
program.
tiny, right? That's where
Yeah.
you're like,
She started it
she
in
started it and then
Mexico.
she wanted you to come here for undergrad
That's
even.
right.
So you still made your way over
I
here.
finally got here. I was a slow learner.
You just had to try some things out on your
Exactly.
own.
I had to
You just
experiment.
needed to know. You needed to know that that's where.
It's been quite the journey. If you talk about, when I got here, I still played AAU basketball and ASA softball, and I did that. And then I never had really played field hockey, and I got into field hockey, believe it or not.
How'd that go?
It was great. I ended up on the U.S. squad.
Stop.
Yeah. I mean, it was a hoot. So it's been a fun journey, and, to play at that level was just really cool.
Yeah.
But there's no way I can be an athlete anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And your athlete identity, your athlete moment was at the peak.
Yeah.
It was up there.
Yeah, it was. It was fun time. It was great.
Part of why I'm starting the podcast and we're talking through it is so often, like you said, people are playing, they're in it, they're the athletes, they're the ones doing it. But then it's when there is that retirement from the competitive side or there's that moving on. Do you remember, was there a decision of you being okay, I'm done actually competing? I'm transitioning over to the coaching side or anything like that. Do you remember that time period or what kind of spurred that on for you?
It was mostly my poor body. I played into my 30s and I kept playing basketball. I got out of softball, and I was really into the field hockey and basketball.
Yeah.
And then 2 things happened. One, my knee, and it started with just a tear and and then eventually they had to take the cartilage out.
So they took it all.
Yeah. And then my back in field hockey.
Yeah.
And, the way you flick and
Oh,
stuff,
totally.
it just twists the
Well, and
heck
even
out of
just
your
the
back.
position you have to be in so you then get your power.
Right. I ended up with a bad back. And again, several years later, I had back surgery. But once you lose your legs and you lose your back, you can't do a whole lot. And at the same time, I'd gotten into coaching, and coaching was starting to explode in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was doing 2 sports. And then for a couple of years, I was also the AD over the men's and the women's program and coaching 2 sports. I thought, this is not sustainable. I was still officiating.
You were doing every single aspect of the game.
Yeah, I was officiating JUCO and D3 national tournaments.
Were other people doing this at the time, or was this just a you thing?
Some, I don't know if they were doing all of it. I mean, there were some people who were coaching and still playing, some that might have been coaching and doing some officiating, not a lot. But as it grew, it was impossible to maintain all of that.
Yeah, fair.
Your career moves on, but your athletic career dies. And so, you live vicariously through your student athletes.
Yeah. So you felt that. You felt that a lot, especially in those early years. And I feel too, you want to hold on to it, right? 'Cause it's you haven't lost the love.
Right.
You haven't lost the love.
True.
You haven't lost all those pieces.
Right.
So you're okay, can you just get that rebound? Do you need me to come in there and do it for
Oh,
you?
yeah.
It's those moments. Did you ever feel okay, I'm not playing anymore. I should move on. I need to separate myself from it. Or was it just kind of it happened how it happened?
It just evolved. I don't know that it was a conscious decision, although I'm sure it was at the time.
Yeah.
But I loved coaching. I loved my career. My career was just, blossoming at the time. So, I was into that. It wasn't like I totally left everything behind.
You started leaning into the right places, just leaning into kind of those other parts.
And I think that's important with athletes. They've got to look beyond their athletic career.
Yeah.
And find outlets for that kind of enthusiasm and the love of the game. I mean, that's the thing, is you love the game.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's and even as I've been, like, talking to other people, it's like you can always almost see the light. You can see the light in all of us, where it's just like you start talking about certain situation or it's like, "Oh, yeah, I, like, hopped in on a drill the other day," and it's just like, "Oh, it's all open again. It's all open,"
That is fun.
Growing up, like, athlete identity was, like, number 1.
Right.
Number 1. Probably to the point of, like you're saying, it's like, I think it's slowly getting a little bit better, and people are starting to talk more about, like, "Hey, you're only gonna be competitive in your sport for so long, so, like, know what your other hobbies are. Know the other thing you like to do."
And a lot of people don't have other hobbies. And
No.
let's take this one step further. The people that go from being an athlete to being a coach, then trying to get out of coaching, say in retirement, or go to another profession. I think that is even more difficult than the athletic switch because they've made it a way of life and their identity is as a coach within a sport. Yeah, their identity from their own perspective, much less others.
Absolutely. How everyone sees you.
Yeah, and so I think for a lot of people, that transition is really, really difficult. So the athletic transition can be very hard, especially for super successful athletes and the media attention now and the public attention and all of that. But going from a coaching role where you're in a fishbowl and everybody sees you and knows who you are and you go to the grocery store and da da da, you know,
Community, right? It's like you're the pillar in the community and
and some former athletes, former coaches stay in the community. Sometimes that's more difficult, sometimes it's not.
yeah.
But some of them totally leave the community because they can kind of establish a new identity. They have to find it.
And it's work.
Yeah, it was. You go from 24/7 to trying to be on a retirement schedule. Yeah, there is a transition without a doubt.
Yeah. So do you feel like for you personally, your transition out of coaching or retirement from coaching specifically was a little bit tougher even than retired from playing?
Yeah, because going from playing to coaching was just an extension. That was great for me. But going from coaching, one, leaving your kids, that's probably the very hardest thing you do. You've developed relationships and, you know, you, you've got a family and you're walking away from your family. And it's really, I think that's gut wrenching. It was for me anyway. And then trying to decide, okay, well, what am I going to do with my life now? And that's never easy. So you have to find transitions in there.
Yeah. Where do you feel like you are on that now?
Oh my gosh, I've been out of coaching for 25 years.
I know. How
Yeah.
you doing?
I'm
Have
great.
you made it?
Oh, I think I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I say that, and yet when I finished coaching, I directed the CVB in town, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, because they needed some help with relationships with the IHSA because they had hosted so many events here. So I did that, cleaned house, and got that going, and hired somebody that knew a whole lot more than I did.
Hey, that's how to do it, right?
And I got into broadcasting because I could still be around the kids. I could still be around the coaches in the game. And I didn't take home all the headaches. I did that from the I guess early 2000 until I still do some games now.
Do you really?
Yeah. And so that helped my transition because I could do it and walk away from it. And that's what's hard about coaching. You just get so worn out.
Yeah. Oh, the schedule alone.
Yeah.
It's like I had that thought. Formally, my training, I went to school for physical therapy.
Oh,
So
okay.
I practice as a physical therapist as well. But I remember having that moment of like, okay, athletic trainer,
Yeah.
physical therapist, which one? And I was just like, the schedule.
Oh, yeah.
is so hard, so rough.
If you're going to go into athletics as a profession, you don't have a personal life and there's no balance. I think that's what drives a lot of people out of athletic training, coaching, athletic administration, any of those kinds of ditties. I think people want a real life and they want a little balance in their life. And to be honest, you can't get that in athletics. And, D3 is closer than D1 or even D2. But still, you're recruiting all summer. I used to tell my assistants, I said, you better enjoy Memorial Day and Labor Day. That's all you get. It is true.
But it's true.
That was all we got.
Yeah. Because anytime you're not with your current actual team,
Yep.
you're recruiting. You're finding the next person to come in.
Yep.
And that's what keeps you at the top of it.
You're right. It's
Yeah.
the only way to be successful.
Yeah. So the Jill Hutchison game plan is just stay still connected to sports
Mm,
in some way.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's comfy for you.
It is.
Yeah.
And, you kind of taper off, to say the least. I think I did 2 broadcasts this year, but I go to all their games when I'm in town and I stay in touch with the coaches and all that. I still care.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoy following the players. Yeah, that's what sport's all about.
It's about the athlete.
It is about the athletes, about the kids. It's about 18-year-olds growing up. They're away from home for the first time. They're testing all of their values and everything else and experimenting with everything under the sun. And, you'd like to think that you have some influence on where they're going in their life.
I cannot personally say that for you, but I'm sure you've impacted a lot of lives.
I don't know.
She's like, go ask my players.
You touch a lot of kids, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
fair.
And the fact that a lot of them stay in touch is great. I love it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's really cool. So you mentioned a little bit earlier, sports side, athlete side. Now we play at golf. You get out there, you hit the ball around a little bit. Anything else? What kind of are those things that you've leaned into in retirement? What's your life now?
I have a lake home in Wisconsin.
Beautiful.
Spend 5 to 6 months there.
Great.
Lots of company, family, friends come visit. Lots of toys, play on the lake. Yeah, I love it.
The things you couldn't do all the years that you were
golly, yeah,
coaching.
absolutely. Yeah, so you can kind of enjoy everything and enjoy people, and yeah, it's fun.
What's the thing that you would say that you've been the most proud of? I know.
In my career, or
It can be anything.
oh, that's an interesting question. I feel like I've had some impact on women's basketball at a collegiate level. I had lots of opportunities during my 30-year career. Um, I was able to host, to direct the first national championship here.
Roll that back. You hosted the first national championship for women's basketball.
Yeah, at Illinois State, at Horton
What year?
Fieldhouse, 1972, just after they passed Title IX, which had zero impact on it. But, we had 3 invitationals before that. Then finally, the powers that be decided, okay, it's time for national championship,
Yeah.
which required setting up qualification, officials, how to get people here, what was it going to be, how big it was, the whole shebang.
And we knew you were really good at drawing out tournament brackets.
Absolutely. I
We
got
knew.
that down. Oh my God. So there were 3 of us that did it. Carol Oglesby from Purdue,
Yeah.
Lugene Moyer, who was at Northern, and
Okay.
myself. I mean, a big
Incredible.
3-person committee.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that was just
Wow.
a great experience, which kind of propelled my career, because then I got into the Olympic sports movement, and women's basketball came around in 76 and got involved with that. I was chair of the rules committee and on the rules committee for 10 years. And we We went from the 6-player to the 5-player to
Uh-huh.
the smaller ball. Oh,
Some of these things too, even growing up in this town, I grew up in Bloomington Normal my whole life. Even what you were saying though about like Illinois State, even pre-U, was the powerhouse of athletics as a whole, both sides, all the sides, but especially in women's sports. And like my brain was blown that I just found out about that recently, even though being so passionate about it and what my life has been, that I'm just like, we need this information out there more. It's
yeah.
awesome.
That's why I came to Illinois State, because they had such a huge program. And the women that led it were national leaders. I
Absolutely.
mean, oh my gosh, when I got here, Phoebe Scott was the chair of the department, and she was one of 3 women who signed the papers that we could have national competition in women's sports at the collegiate level. It was,
That's everything.
oh my
That's
God.
everything.
Lori Mabry ended up being our one and only athletic director. Um, she was president of AIAW, the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women.
Okay.
The leaders we had
Incredible.
were, yeah, and within the state of Illinois, they were just as impressive. I mean, Southern Illinois had Charlotte West and Joe Thorpe, and Northern had Mo Bell and Eugene Moyer. I mean, there were just great leaders back there that were all on the national scene that moved women's sports from sports they played a thing into intercollegiate sports. So it was a great place to be in the 60s, 70s, 80s. It really
Yeah.
was.
Which is earlier than you hear about women's sports being talked about, you know?
I'm always disappointed when they talk about the records
Yes.
and Caitlin Clark's scoring record. I just thought it was fantastic that she recognized Lynette Woodard at that basketball game, and she was in the AIW era. Now, and there were people before that. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
they were playing AAU because there was no place else to play.
Yeah.
A lady named Nera White was better than any athlete I've seen since. I was in an AAU game in a national tournament that was held in Gallup, New Mexico.
Yeah.
And we were the New Mexico state champs. And
Uh-huh.
there was an 8-team league in AAU at the time. She was at National Business College in Tennessee. They had lost to Joan Joyce's team from Orange the year before. They got mad. They decided they were going to come to this tournament and show people they could dominate. We drew them on the first game. We scored our first basket at halftime on a half court shot, literally. But Nera White took a ball off. We were playing what they called the roving game. It was between the 3-player and the 5.
Okay. Okay.
Where 2 players could go
Yes.
and you could take turns who went. So we were in the roving game. This had to be, I was a sophomore, junior in college, so it was probably 65, 66, somewhere in there. Took a ball off the rim, took 3 dribbles, and made a layup.
No.
She was,
Incredible.
you won't see that
No.
again. I mean, she
No.
was just the greatest athlete ever. Softball pitcher, basketball player,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, we've lost some of those people and their records and what they could do. But yeah, so I wish when they talked about women's college records, they incorporated the 10 years of AIAW.
Yeah.
Because there were some great athletes during that
Absolutely.
era.
Absolutely. And I with all the talk, and we're obviously 2 weekends ago now?
Yeah.
2 weekends ago, the first time that, on a broadcasting side of it and all of that, more people tuned into the women's game than the men's game. Like, incredible.
It was incredible.
But even like you're saying, like, I am grateful that it's bringing out these conversations and it's starting. More needs to be said. Like, this information, we all have to keep talking about it more. But like you said, and I think I saw Lynette Woodard quote that was like, I'm not like, great if she breaks my record. No one would know about me. no one would know about me if she wasn't getting close to this and all of
Yeah,
that.
I thought she was really graceful. In fact,
So, yeah,
that's what records are for, to be broken, and Caitlin Clark's records are gonna be broken as well.
absolutely.
I mean, there's great young talent coming up, and, that's the exciting part. The game has grown, and that's why we have people interested in the game, because the game
Absolutely.
has gotten better and better. But there were some great ones back then.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Talk a little bit about, we were kind of talking about, you kind of played a role in the whole going from 6 people to 5 people. And I don't know, I'm aware, and I know too, because like Iowa was the last state that really clung on to the 6 player, right? And so it's like I know a little bit because my college coach, actually, she was the end of the Iowa, like 6 or 3 and 3. Personally, as a defense and rebounding person, I might thrive.
It was a good game.
I might have thrived in that. My wife, leading scorer of the team, defense rebounding all
That's
day for
funny.
me. Some people don't even know about the 6 game and what that means, let alone transitioning out of that.
Yeah. Just 2 courts, 3 players on each side. You had 3 dribbles. You couldn't knock the ball out of anybody's hands.
What?
Oh, yeah, you couldn't be physical like that. You couldn't hit each other. God, what else? It was crazy. But 3 on defense, 3 on offense. Most of the time, in some areas, they play player-to-player defense. Otherwise, they're in a triangle defense. And then in the mid-60s, and the push came from AAU, which was the sports governing body. And AAU was trying to be competitive on an international level.
Okay.
They were competing in the Pan Am Games, but they hadn't been moved into the Olympics yet. And they were trying to get the game up to that level.
Yeah.
So they proposed what they called the roving game. So in the rover, 2 players on defense, 2 on offense, and 2 that could play the full length of the court. But if you got tired, you could pass the baton to any of the other 2. Yeah, so if you happen to be on defense when you got tired, somebody on defense could play the roving part.
Interesting.
So, yeah. But
my brain immediately goes to like, oh my gosh, how much different strategy could you have on like when you pass it off and who you pass it to and all
well,
of that.
there's that. And
Yeah.
then there's, we had to go from a triangle zone to a 4-player zone to a 4-player offense. So there was a lot to process
Interesting.
with all of that.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about the roving game,
Yeah.
it was good for the 2 kids that played defense that really weren't ball skilled.
Yeah.
It was good for the offense
Yeah.
that was ball skilled, and it was good for the athletes because they could go full court. So it had some pluses for everybody.
People could really thrive in their spot.
Yeah. So in a physical education environment, it would have been a great game.
Got it.
So then AAU kept pushing for the 5-player game. I couldn't tell you how I ever got there, but in 69, I got on the National Rules Committee. And the year I went, I was representing DGWS, who published
Okay.
all the rules.
Yes.
And was part of the physical education side of sports. And it was pretty much dominated by college physical educators.
Okay.
That's DGWS, Division for Girls and Women's Sports. So I was one of their representatives. I think there were 3 of us or something like that. AAU had reps. The High School Federation had reps. They had people from the armed forces. I mean, it incorporated everybody that played basketball. So we got to this meeting, and AAU had really kind of gotten their act together to try and pass the 5-player game.
What was your take on that?
yeah.
You wanted 5.
Absolutely. So it passed the committee. It goes back to the leaders in DGWS, and they said, no, there's no way. They said, we are not Fran Koenig was president that year. She's
Yeah.
at Central Michigan.
Yeah.
We are not going to jump into a 5-player game until the coaches and the officials and everybody else gets on board. So we're going to have a 1-year experimental. And you can play the 5-player or you can play the roving game. You have your choice.
Okay.
And I think
Everybody in the game had to be on the same page. You couldn't
No.
play a roving versus a 5.
Yeah, in the game, you had to
Yeah,
play
yeah,
the same
yeah,
game.
yeah.
So most people played the 5-player game. And of
Yeah.
course, there was no championship or anything like that back then. There was, I shouldn't say that, there was an invitational.
Yeah.
And we played the 5-player by then. So my thesis was everybody thought that the female heart could not tolerate high heart rate for a prolonged period of time. That's why women couldn't run marathons. That's why we couldn't play 5-player basketball.
So that was like the basis of everything. Is they just
American Medical
clung on to
Association.
this.
Yeah. So I did in my thesis at Illinois State, we hooked electrodes up to 2 of our athletes because that's all the equipment we had.
Okay.
We played some 5-player AAU games. Their heart rates maintained 180, which is a maximum heart rate.
Yes.
It went above 200, but they would maintain 180 for 5, 6, 8 minutes, And so it wasn't an issue, but we took that to the committee that year. And I don't think it made all the difference, but it went into some of the input for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
by then we passed the 5-player game, but it was a real battle to try and get it through to physical educators who thought it was unladylike, and that generation still existed.
Yeah.
And there was the older generation and the younger generation.
And even like you said too, and it's like, okay, we've got these physical educators. They're the ones who are studying these things, right? They're studying it. So it's like you would think, from an outsider perspective, it's like you would think they would all be pushing it. They would all want this, but there's that underlying societal
Very much so.
external view, pressure of like, then also if society as a whole is now viewing these women as more unladylike, it's your fault that they're viewed more unladylike.
And they were all raised that way, so they didn't
know any different.
They didn't know differently, and they weren't trying to be obnoxious about it. That's just how they were raised, and when you're raised like that, it's hard to change.
Yeah. What do you feel like made you see through that?
I wanted to play.
You were like, I didn't care about anything other than
Oh
playing.
my gosh.
That was your drive.
First time we went to a roving game, I never gave it up. I would play the whole game as a rover. I loved it. And then when I thought, oh golly, we could go to a 5-player game, it's to die for.
Because then you're like, oh, now we just have 5 rovers.
That's right. Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
So I loved playing the 5-player game. I can remember one game, sweat pouring off of you, running up and down the floor, and you can just feel the breeze on you. It was one of those moments when you just think, God, is this fun or what?
And just it's usually like you're like past that second wall and you can run for forever. You're like, I could play this game for another 2 hours.
You are absolutely right.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah,
I
it was
know that
great.
feeling. Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, so you saw through it and you were like, priority, playing. Getting out there, getting other people to be able to play, getting other people to be able to feel these things.
By now, I was at Illinois State, and I was coming in as the head coach, and those kids wanted to play 5-player. I mean, they tasted it with the AAU games.
Yeah.
They wanted 5-player.
Yeah.
So, they're the athletes of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to change. You got to keep changing.
With AAU, when the kids were playing, was that school related or it was all separate?
No, we got permission to play or I would have been fired. Yeah, and it took a while to convince the PE people that was going to be okay and it was an okay environment.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it was just not popular.
So you were hired as the head, what would be deemed D1 at the time, women's basketball coach.
Right.
That's how it would equate to now.
I came as a grad assistant.
Okay.
And I did that 68, 69. And then 69, I was like an assistant
Okay.
unofficially.
Yeah.
And then in 70, I was a head coach for basketball
Okay.
and softball.
Amazing. Amazing. But even at that time, you were having to advocate for your kids
Oh, yeah.
to be like, okay, PE department, we need to be allowed to play.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. You had to convince the, what do you call them? The more established
Yeah.
people that it's going to be okay. And, they were all worried about it. And then came Title IX and scholarships. That was even more difficult.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They thought the men had just had all kinds of issues with scholarships
Got it.
and gambling and cheating. And we were just going to go right down that same alley. And we can't let that happen to these women.
Seriously.
Oh, we had 60 women on our staff.
Yeah.
2 of us voted for scholarships.
No way.
Yeah.
For the women's game.
Yeah. That was a battle.
Yeah.
It really
You
was.
won.
Well, yeah. Took a while. Took a few lawsuits.
Oh, no.
Not on our campus, but
Yeah.
nationally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For it to kind of get
Yeah.
through with everything. Yeah. And now there's NIL
Oh,
and all
my
of that.
God.
But that goes over my head too. I'm just like, I can't imagine.
I can't embrace that.
I'm not sure where my head is at on it, but I see, I can see both sides.
Both sides,
I can get there.
exactly.
I can get there.
I think it's unfortunate that a free college education isn't worth a scholarship.
Yeah.
That's not enough. But I see where they're coming from. Coaches get more and more money. They're playing the game. Why not us?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I love that. So, the idea of a no former athlete and the idea that like a former athlete doesn't exist. What just me saying that without us talking more, what does that kind of spark in your brain? What kind of thoughts does that make you have?
That would be a boring life for me. That would have been really, if I was just a PE teacher or something like that, or worked in an office, I think it would just be pathetic. I can't even imagine.
The joy, the hard times, the everything that you've gotten from it.
All of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just, as hard as it is to be totally absorbed like that, the rewards are just as good and totally absorbing.
Yeah.
So you gotta take the good with the bad in life, period.
You got that right.
Now with the media coverage that athletes are getting, I think it makes it even more difficult for them to make that transition because they have been the center of attention. And then they move on to some other career outside of sports. And there's not that attention.
No.
And I think that is a real transition emotionally.
And I think for me, part of it, and again, I wasn't at the end of my playing career, like I wasn't playing D1. I wasn't going to go on to professional, anything like that on a higher level. But even that piece of my 10-year college reunion is this year.
Ooh,
I know. Look out.
Nico.
Thank you. But even with that, it's just like, until recently, I was like, oh, I function off of external validation.
Absolutely.
But then in my brain, I'm just like, quit doing that. But it is so
Ingrained.
I'm out there for the love of the game. I'm out there for my teammate. I'm performing for my teammate. I'm doing the thing. I'm playing the role my team needs. I'm running the play that I'm supposed to be running. And it's so ingrained.
But
Yeah.
don't you think it is for everybody?
See, I don't know.
I think it is. I think everybody needs external reinforcement.
You think even people outside of athletics?
Absolutely.
It's just humans.
Yes. I think everybody thrives on compliments and support. And it's obviously at a different level.
Totally.
But whether it comes from parents, from friends, from colleagues, associates,
Yeah.
I think we all need that reinforcement. to validate that what we're doing is okay. And I just think that's part of human nature. Certainly, some people probably need it more than others
Yeah.
externally because maybe they have more internal validation. I don't see that from a lot of people, honestly,
Yeah.
whether they're in public service or in corporate world. I just think everybody needs that validation.
Fair.
Is it a raise in their salary? Is it a promotion? Is it winning an election? I mean,
Yeah.
I think all of that is part of human nature.
Fair.
In sports, we're lucky we get it whether you want it or not.
You're so right. You're so right. Yeah. Which, yeah, I do think it's like, that's such an innate part of sport.
It is.
It's such an innate part of sport. So it's like default mode.
Sports is in a fishbowl. And so everything in sport is magnified. So that's also a reason why athletes can grow up quicker, because they have to deal with so many issues under that kind of a microscope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And because it's got all those things packed into one, it can be a vehicle for so many things.
Absolutely.
Right? It can push change. It can push those different things, which you've
It has,
experienced
yeah.
tenfold, you know.
Even in society, much less in sport.
Yes.
I mean, look at all the stuff that's happened through sport to speak out.
Absolutely. It's
So,
beautiful.
Yeah, it's a tool.
And a lot of women in those sports being the speakers.
Absolutely. Is that
Yeah.
not the best?
It is
Yeah.
the best. It
Thank
is
you
the
for
best.
Billie Jean King and some
Oh.
of those ladies.
The best of the best. You're up there.
I don't
You're
know
up there, my
about
friend. I
that,
know.
but
I knew you were going to say it. I know you were going to do it, but.
I was in the right place at the right time. I loved what I did.
And you know what? Those people, I bet, all say the same thing. They do. They do. Well, thank you for those things
Yeah, thanks.
that you have done. What's next? What's next for Jill? What's coming?
Play a little bit more golf, play at the lake,
Yeah.
have some fun,
Beautiful.
spend more time with my family.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. Thank you
thank you.
so much for joining. Thank you for being a part of our No Former Athlete community. I'm so excited at how this community is growing already, and we can't wait to connect to more of you. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps us out a lot, and we appreciate it. We'll see you in the next episode.